It's our pleasure to invite and welcome Deep Karla, the Chairman and the Group CEO of MakeMyTrip.com. Thank you. As most of you are customers, you can address your customer queries during the Q&A session. He is founder of India's leading online travel company. In fact, one of India's largest e-commerce business today in the country. He's been the first Indian company to be listed in NASDAQ, and the achievement list goes on. But personally, sir, I'll tell you that 10 of us sitting in the first row booked our tickets to this trip through Make My Trip. An MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a bachelor's in economics. He's won various awards and accolades. Important among those, as an Entrepreneur of the Year for Business Transformation. And KPMG recently identified him as India's one of most powerful digital influencers. He's going to share with us today his learnings from his journey in Make My Trip. Travel is an uncertain business, flight delays and everything, so he's also going to tell us about some of the uncertainties that he has faced. Deep, it's our pleasure to welcome you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure. Raj invited me, and it's my honor to be here. It's a very august audience, and I hopefully will be able to give you some takeaways over the next 30 to 40 minutes. And thanks for that lovely introduction. Can all the people who haven't bought on Make My Trip also stand up? It's good to know. It's good to know. Just two of you? Okay. We'll do a deal later. We'll do a deal. Okay. Wonderful. No, it's great, yeah. I can tell you about 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, sometimes one would go to conferences and speak, and oftentimes ask this question by show of hands, and the numbers of people who hadn't transacted, I think were aware was pretty good, but who hadn't transacted was larger. So it's good to know that we're hopefully making an impact. I'd love to take customer issues and complaints, but then we might run out of time. We are a B2C brand, but I'll like to walk you through a lot of stuff. I'll leave you with my email ID as well, which might be the easiest way to connect with me after this. So before starting Make My Trip in 2000, I had worked for about 8 years. After my MBA, I did 3 different jobs. I was a banker first with ABN AMRO, and then I worked with a company called AMF Bowling. I actually brought them to India. It's interesting that we're in Ambience Mall because one of the best facilities of bowling that came up eventually was here, not during my time. And then I worked with GE Capital for a bit. So I did get an opportunity to work with, I guess, one of the best companies in the world, one of the finest banks at that point of time. Ironically, ABN doesn't exist as ABN today, but that is the world we are in. And then a very young entrepreneurial company called AMF Bowling out of close to where you are, Brian, out of Richmond, Virginia. And it was a very entrepreneurial kind of opportunity to bring the sport or the pastime or the hobby of 10-pin bowling and pool tables to India way back in '95. Now, what's interesting is that in ABN AMRO, I was there for 3 years. It took me 2 years to realize that I'm not cut out to be a banker, and I probably, should not be doing that. It really, I think, the first job for most of us is a very special job. I often liken the first job to one's first love. You put in everything into that. It's you're very passionate about that, you want to make it work. I see freshers come into our organization every now and then. We're still hiring in a decent manner, and I like to connect with them during their first month and spend time. And the passion that you have in your first job is something else. I think all of us will remember that because you really want to go there and conquer the world. You're armed with a good degree, you're armed with something, and you're saying, this is now the time, this is my stage, I'm going to make it all happen, and it's wonderful. And that was exactly what ABN did for me. I loved it. It was a wonderful place, but I didn't like banking. It took me a while. It actually took me a couple of years to realize I don't want to be a banker all my life, and I think that was very important for me. I did something very entrepreneurial after that. I worked for AMF Bowling, but it was a job. And my success was largely, personal success was linked to the success of the company in India. And really what I did, set up a small organization out here. In 4 years of AMF bowling, it was very clear that it was I won't say colossal, but it was a failure. It was a pretty significant failure in terms of the business, the company, what I'd managed to achieve. I'd hoped we'll have 2,000 lanes by then in the country. We got 200 lanes. Obviously, something was wrong. It's very easy to analyze in hindsight what went wrong, and the reality is that the market wasn't ready. And when the market's not ready, you can do everything you want, but it'll just take that much time. Large-scale development did not exist. Between 95 to 99, we hardly had any malls. The kind of malls we have all over the country today in Tier B, Tier 2 cities, Tier 3 cities, we are getting malls. The malls everywhere. In the big cities, you only have malls now. So we needed that kind of footprint that you can get a real kind of center in, and it wasn't there. But I did realize that the reason I labored on for 4 years, I really enjoyed what I was doing. And the point I'm trying to get to, and even in GE Capital, fascinating company, but in 16 months, I definitely got bitten by the bug of doing my own thing. The central point out here, and most of you have probably figured it out already, but it took me a long time to really figure out what gets me going, to really figure out what gets me up in the morning, irrespective of whether I've slept 4 hours or 7 hours or whatever it is, and super excited about going into work, about conquering the world. The mind starts spinning virtually 5-10 minutes after you wake up, and you say, listen, there's so much I want to do. I can't wait to get either to a screen or to your phone and start. And the ideas every day. And that is an amazing feeling. And I'm not just saying it. I had that feeling in AMF bowling. I just loved my job. It didn't matter to me it wasn't financially successful, but beyond a certain point, the reality hit me. And I tell a lot of folks this, especially younger folks, and that's why I said I don't know how relevant it's going to be out here, but I'm sure you'll agree with me, when we find our calling at work, we all know what we love doing in free time. Whether it's reading or books or gardening or whatever, we all know, and we love doing that, and we can do that for hours. If we say, what would you ideally do on a holiday? Some people would say, I'd be on the sea, I'd be in the mountains, I'd be walking, I'd be reading, and that stuff we love doing, that's clear. But what do we love doing at work? And that's the central point. What do we really love doing? Which are those projects, which are those companies, which are those jobs when we get involved with them? Time doesn't matter. We don't look at the time. We've all had days, and sometimes we have too many days, where we can't wait for the clock to strike 6 or 7 or whatever time you go home. Those are horrible days. That day took away a full productive day because you were focused on something else. You were not enjoying what you were doing. When you're enjoying what you're doing, you can't have enough of time. You're saying, listen, I hope the only reason you go back is because there are responsibilities in this family, everything else you go back. But when you're loving what you're doing, we've all done overnighters. And why do we do overnighters? And what keeps us going? It's not coffee and Red Bull alone. It's because there's something from within, and that spirit and that excitement, once you find that, I think you can create magic irrespective. So for me, the finding of those 8 years, and the big one for me was really about, what do I love doing? The answer was, I loved doing something new. I really enjoyed taking the untrodden path. It didn't frighten me, it actually excited me. I think I can confess that it also probably was good that you didn't have already a set standard. Maybe it works both ways. Sometimes it's a little scary and intimidating and daunting that there is no benchmark, so where do you go? But on the other side, since there's no benchmark, if you do reasonably well, that's probably a good start too. So it works both ways, but I definitely got excited by doing the new. I definitely got excited by doing entrepreneurial kind of stuff, so setting up my own team, setting up structures. I definitely did not enjoy certain things. Banking was one. I don't think I enjoyed working for other people. And it's not a great thing to say, but it's a reality. But what I have to remember today when I've set up an organization, we're about 1,200 people now, there will be people out there who don't enjoy working for other people, including me. And it's not wrong, it's not bad, they just don't like it. It doesn't give them their mojo. So what you have to then do with these people, and there are a couple of very senior guys I have who started early on with me, I'm very proud that they are now co-founders of the company. What you have to realize is how you work with them. They don't work for you, they work with you. And the world order has changed not to work for people, but to work with people. And the moment you give senior people that respect, especially the folks who have it in their self to go all the way, again, you can create magic and your company can grow manifold. So for all of you who are leading companies, I'm sure you figured that out, that when you get people like that, the last thing you want to do is give them orders. because that's the only thing they don't want. You'll give them ideas. They're not order takers, they're order makers. And to have order makers with you in your organization, you can multiply phenomenally. So in terms of launching Make My Trip, I think timing is very important. I think it's fair to say I launched Make My Trip when I was just a shade under 30 or just about 30. I definitely would think twice about doing that at 40. Some people do it at 40, some people do it at 50. I think the reality is that in India, it takes a minimum of 10 years to build a good business, a durable business. I'm not talking about a business that you build quickly and you sell it off. I've been doing this for 13 years, and I can tell you there are which we'd love to climb and love to scale. Is the passion the same? It's not very different. They're different kind of challenges now. It's not like start up and build. Now it's obviously scale, but it's still a good challenge. But timing is super critical, keeping in mind the kind of time horizon. So I mentor a lot of young entrepreneurs. I meet them from time to time as part of my TIE responsibilities, TIE, and otherwise. I really love doing that and typically do 2 a week. And when I talk to these guys, one thing I keep asking them. One is about your business. What problem are you solving? That's really important. Are you connecting with customers or not? And fundamentally, entrepreneurs get so lost in what they're building, they forget what problem they're solving. They think this is the ultimate thing. It's a common, it's a common malaise, I think, around the world. However, I also ask them one thing: what's your time horizon? And the moment folks say, 4 or 5 years, that's not entrepreneurship. Nothing's going to get done in 4 or 5 years. This is not Silicon Valley, where you can do something real quick. You can build an Instagram, couple of years, sell it off for $1 billion. Doesn't happen in India. Everything takes, and you guys would know this better than me, at least double the time, if not triple the time it takes in the States. Sad, but that's our infrastructure. Even to get a business started and a company started is pretty painful. Early days as an entrepreneur, you got to do many things which have nothing to do with your business. Setting up a company and getting internet in 2000 meant actually, well, hate to say it, but we had to get our linesmen at night, sometimes middle of the night, because we had an IPLC which ran from US to India, and it was just 64K and moved to 128, but it would get cut. We were in Okhla, and there was a station called Tekhand. It would get cut by rats. And we had to get our linesman to come in the middle of the night to fix that, otherwise our business went down. And that linesman would not come without some degree of, facilitation. And we would have to get him to come. But that's business, and you had to do that. And guess who did that? I think I did it 3 times before one of my colleagues said, I think, Deep, I'll go next time and do it. I said, well, I hope you can, because it has to happen really fast. This is an art. It's an art to get the linesman to come there and to make sure it doesn't go down the next time. Things have changed. We obviously have redundancies now, and things have changed a lot. But I think timing is very important to keep in mind whenever you're starting a new business. For me, why the internet? Fairly simple answer. It presented a wonderful platform to set up something which, at least at that time, at least to get started, was fairly cost effective rather than a manufacturing setup or something else. Fairly efficient at that point of time. Later on, if it's a B2C business, you need a lot of money. But to get going, it was definitely cheaper. But at a more fundamental level, I was convinced, due to a couple of personal incidents, that the internet was going to change our lives. This was 99. I was moonlighting. I was working for GE, and then late at night, post-dinner, I remember, I would settle down on a dial-up connection and probably surf and spend a lot of time on leading sites around the world and trying to understand what's going on in this medium. That went on for 3 months, and I was convinced, because I sold a second-hand car online once, and I made probably 10,000-20,000 rupees more than what was promised by a dealer friend kind of thing, and not his fault. It was just disintermediation at play. And because I actually booked a hotel room once for Phuket in Thailand, which was $10 a night cheaper. So it was pretty fascinating if you thought and said, what's going on? And what was going on was you were just going direct to supplier much faster than having 2-3 middlemen in the place. So I was convinced the internet's going to change our lives. And 99 was actually very, very early days, because 97 was probably the beginning of it in India. And 99 was very early. And why online travel? I have to be honest and frank. I love travel, but that wasn't the reason. The reason was a clinical evaluation. I really looked at what will work in India. And I had 2 plans. I guess I was hedging myself. So I had an online stockbroking plan, online travel plan. I had a 3rd plan, which thankfully I didn't go down, because my world that time was all about a 6-month-old baby. So I also had a plan to do baby stuff, but thankfully I had better sense prevailed at that point of time. I believe there's a fine line between resilience and stubbornness, and only hindsight will tell you what you're doing. And I've had this experience not once, but multiple times. In Make My Trip, we had multiple times where we should have packed up and we should have said, I think we had 3 close shaves with death. We had no money, there was no light at the end of the tunnel, and nothing was going right at all. This is between 2001 to 2004. Really dark years for us because 9/11 had happened, the world of travel had collapsed, the world of dot-com bust had taken place 2000, 2001, funding was impossible. So nothing was really going right, and no one believed that dot-com or internet models will really make a difference in India. It was always, oh yeah, this works in the US, it might work in some other countries, but India is very different. People will keep buying across the counter, people want to see someone, they want to, it wasn't so long ago, but I think we kept going and kept laboring on basis a couple of things. I think there were just 2 things. One was analytics, and really in our business, in analytics we trust. We looked at the numbers, and the core number in our business is conversion. You can measure conversion in 100 different ways. It's the funnel. So the funnel is when you come to our site, that's the home page. And when you go into, let's say, the flights funnel, that's the, you go to a review page. Or rather, you go to a listing page, then you go to a review page, then you go to a payment page, and then what we call a thank you page. So it's a 5-step funnel, pretty similar. We measure conversion at every step, at every level. And if that conversion is improving, then we are doing something right. If it's not improving, we're on the wrong track. Even new product development is all done with the same philosophy. So one was analytics, which kept us going. We were indeed improving. However, we didn't have enough money to make the lines cross, revenue and cost. And the second was gut. And I don't think we can do anything new without gut. People are trying to now make a science out of gut and instinct. And they're actually trying to figure out, so where does gut come from? Where does instinct come from? Is there already some scientific process running in the brain which helps you say, hey, I think this is going to work. Something tells me from within this is going to work. It doesn't happen just like that. You have to trust your gut, but you have to try to back it up with analytics. So I think it's the mix of the 2. In AMF bowling, I was plain stubborn. I went on for 4 years. I can now say I should have quit in 2 years. It wasn't going to happen. I probably wasted 2 years of my life doing that. But when you're in the zone, and I think the hallmark of any entrepreneur is not to give up. I think it comes from self-esteem. I've thought about this a lot. I think it comes from, ego is a bad word, but if you use it in a good way, it's probably self-esteem. And you want to say, I don't want to fail at any cost. And that keeps you going because you're saying, not just for others, but this is very important for myself that I can succeed. And I think that's very important. So there's a fine line really between the 2. And finally, I think it's really important to have lasting inspirations. I've certainly had some, and they've stayed the course. Way back in '99, I remember reading, following Jobs for the longest time, the Apple story, and just how Steve Jobs came back and how he was thrown out of his own company. I mean, how terrible can that be by a person who he brought on, who led the board, who took him out, and how he came back and took this company to the glory, made it the most valuable company in the world. Unbelievable if you think about it. And that book is really, it still gives me goosebumps. So you've got to read, I think, Steve's story for sure. Jeff Bezos was the founder of, is the founder rather, of Amazon. And Amazon is probably the best company in the world when it comes to customer service online with mega scale. It's really hard to do. I believe Make My Trip is today maybe a 5 on 10 trying to be a 6 on 10. We were a 2 on 10 on customer service online. But we've learned a lot, we're investing a lot, and we're saying that's for us, the gold standard there is actually Amazon and a company they bought 2 years ago called Zappos, which is even better, but a much smaller company. And it's phenomenal how they do it. Everyone who joins Make My Trip is almost coerced to make a transaction, not just on Make My Trip and other travel sites, but on Amazon, and then cancel it. And you've got to believe, you've got to do it to believe the kind of experience. The amount of safety nets and the amount of hand-holding, you don't call. Their whole goal towards online customer service is to minimize calls. Why should anyone need to call? And it's a phenomenal goal. It's almost similar to Apple's goal of being minimalistic. How can product be made more minimum? So Apple would start with a product design and say, what all can we take away from it? So that's why the original iPods were so flat and simple, and you said, what's going on? Very different from the Walkman. They actually take away, and that's their beginning of design. which is a phenomenal way to approach design. And finally, Southwest, and Brian and I were talking about Southwest some time back, leading low-cost carrier airline in the US, probably the most successful story of airlines making money over last maybe 10 years, 36 quarters in a row they made a profit, which is very hard for an airline. A phenomenal customer service. What they would do, and that's very inspiring for me, is they would empower frontline staff. So their frontline staff, the air hostess and the bursar in the flight or someone on the call, was empowered to actually make good a mistake that had happened. So if an air hostess accidentally spilled some coffee on your suit and the customer got obviously upset, say, we're really sorry for that, you know, there was turbulence, but it's our fault, you'd give a $100 voucher to the person there and then for your next purchase. Didn't have to go and check with, you know, bursar, didn't have to go and say, we'll get back to you and all there and then. Very empowering, and that's the kind of places people like to work for. Not McDonald's. McDonald's people work for McDonald's because they don't have other options. No one wants to flip burgers. But they work for companies like this where they say, irrespective of your position, you are made to feel powerful, you're empowered. You can decide if it was $100 or whatever. And that for us is very inspirational, and we're trying to institute a similar level of empowerment in the frontline staff. So a few learnings. Reading the market correctly, I alluded to this earlier. Two very interesting examples. So can you see this at the back? Yeah? So do you know what's going on here? Anyone seen this before? It's a common one. Okay, so hold your horses who've seen it before. For the others, so this is a famous cola company, and it could be a Snope. I don't even know if it's an urban legend, but it's a very interesting one. So a cola company launched their product and put up this billboard in a foreign country. And guess what happened? They completely bombed, because this happened to be an Arabic country where they read from right to left. It's as simple as that. You read from right to left. The point is simple, whether it's urban legend or not. The point is simple. The point is that do we do enough to understand our market? So in Make My Trip, we actually launched in 2000 in India and in US, India, non-resident Indians coming back. And within 3 months of launch, from October to December 2000, we shut down India because the numbers didn't make sense. Lots of lookers, very few bookers. Conversion was not moving at all. Conversion was abysmal. People weren't buying. They weren't ready to trust the internet. IRCTC had not happened. People had not got the confidence to book online to give their credit card. They wanted to browse online, get the best fare, and then call up their travel agent. We've all done it. We did a lot of focus group to understand what's going on. Why aren't people buying? However, NRIs in the US were used to buying online. Whether it was Expedia or Amazon or someone else is saying, this works. If it doesn't work, you know, I can get my money back, etc. I have enough safeguards in the system. But here the market wasn't ready. I think the best decision we made, otherwise we would have surely perished, as did all the other travel online companies at that point of time. There were probably 20 of them. They all perished because they labored on in India, kept pouring more money into India when the market wasn't ready. So in hindsight, I think that was a great decision to shut down India and wait for India to open up. And India did open up, but it took 2005. So it took a lot of patience, a lot of resilience, and it was very frustrating because non-resident Indian was 3 million people. India potentially was 300 million people. I mean, there was, you know, you really wanted this market to open up. And what changed that? I think two things fundamentally. Indian Railways, IRCTC, gave people the confidence that it's safe to put your card online. This works. And low-cost carriers came in and they changed the game. The content that low-cost carriers had was not available on that green and black screen we call a GDS, which your travel agent has. So your travel agent, when you called him and said, you know, I want to go from Delhi to Bombay, would say, go on Jet, go on Sahara, go on Air India. Say, but I saw, you know, Air Deccan, and that's a fantastic fare. Reluctantly, the travel agent would have to go online to Air Deccan, put a login password, have money there to hold the ticket. It was not worth making 200 rupees or 300 rupees or whatever. It just wasn't worth the while. Technology could solve that problem, and that's exactly what we did. By opening up real-time threads with all the low-cost carriers platforms, getting the info that you do, that was the job of technology. It was meant for automation. It was never meant for people. So I think these two factors changed our fortunes definitely. A very big learning is about hiring better than yourself. And this is for folks at the back. I know this may not be very clear. David Ogilvy of the advertising legend said, and these are those Russian dolls which go one on top of another, if each of us hires people who are smaller than we are, we shall become a company of dwarfs. But if each of us hires people who are bigger than we are, we will become a company of giants. It's as simple as that. Nobody does it. Very, very, very few people do this. And the only people who can do this and should be doing this without fear are entrepreneurs. Because, you tell a guy who's a senior guy in a company, please go ahead and hire better than yourself, the guy will say, yeah, right. And you're going to make me redundant because that's the way it goes. But why shouldn't entrepreneurs do this? Why should there be any shame in hiring people who are better than you? You're growing your company as bright as them, and they can't handle it. They're saying, listen, I'm going at 100 miles an hour. I can't wait for you. I can't wait to get done. It's common. We all know people like this. They're probably meant to be in trades and in businesses which are, solo-oriented. So trading, it's a great idea of where you need to be with the screen. You don't need a team. It doesn't matter. And certain other, maybe research, etc., where you work singularly, maybe even professors where you work singularly. That's a good place for super brilliant people to be, where they don't have to work in a team. But as we all know, working in a company, and especially from project management, program management, it has to be all about working in a team. So this has been a pretty interesting learning where we've had examples of actually wonderful people but not fitting in. We've taken the hard call almost each time because they start destroying the culture, which is very important for every company. I'm going to speed up a bit because of time, but I do want to run through a few slides. So the yes boss syndrome, again, for people at the back, and Dilbert is clearly my favorite cartoon strip. So Dilbert's boss is asking, how are you doing on your unspoken objectives? For those of you who don't know, Dilbert's boss is a complete idiot. And so Dilbert says, my what? And the boss says, I'm referring to the goals I have in my mind, but I've never mentioned. And Dilbert says, so he asks him again, so how are those going? And Dilbert has got it, and he says, I'm totally nailing them. I got them covered. So this is a great conversation. No one has any idea, what we're talking about, but, Dilbert's pleasing his boss. I hope you don't have too many bosses like Dilbert's boss, but the reality is, if you get people who are yes boss people in the company, it is the worst thing you can do. It's the opposite of hiring great people, obviously. But we fall into that trap. We all like to hire people who talk like us, who react like us. In interviews, I think we've all now mastered some degree of art in interviewing, and we'll have killer questions, 1 or 2 killer questions to throw the person off, to see how he reacts, she reacts, etc. And if the person answers that question in a way that you would have answered or you expect it to be answered, you'll say, acha hai, aadmi acha hai, a good guy, we must get him online. He gets it. That's human nature because, you see yourself in that person. Sorry for the folks who don't get Hindi, but basically what we're saying, that guy gets it. He's good or she's good. I should get the person on. And we end up hiring people who basically are clones or mini clones who think like you, who don't refine the quality of decision making in the company, who don't have the guts to stand up to you in a nice way with logic in a company. I always say, and this is true, your best friend at work is the person who irritates you the most, especially if you're the CEO. There'll be people who will irritate you, will get under your skin and make it uncomfortable. They're the same people who will have the temerity in a board meeting to actually raise their hand and sometimes not raise their hand, just blurt out and say, no, I don't agree with you at all because of da-da-da-da-da. And there's stunned silence because everyone's waiting for reaction. Boss has been made to look stupid. Now, what is boss going to do? This is very interesting. And everyone's like saying, wow, this is going to be fun. And it's up to you how you're going to react to that. The first time you'll get very upset. You get red face, you get upset. But then you have to realize that's what's helping taking your company to the next level. Otherwise, why did you hire those people? Don't have them. If you know all the answers, go ahead and do it on your own. You don't need to listen to anyone. At least in our case, our company is where the company is because I think we have enough people like this who are willing to challenge and not give up the fight. Relentlessly with logic, they'll keep going, which is, I think, pretty good. Evolution of the team, big realization. Horses for courses is true. And I think the best exponent of this is Sunil Mittal at Bharti, where you realize that some people who are great startup people are not very good scale people and not very good next level people. And that tends to happen. I don't think there are too many people who are great at every stage. Sunil has, I think, religiously changed CEOs between 3 to 4 years each time. And he said, he's gone on record to say, this person is good to go from here to here, take the company from here to here. Doesn't fire them, typically gives them something else to do. I remember a gentleman who was with him long back, N. Arjun, who started one of their services, still there, running some new area of business. It's phenomenal. You just have to figure out what's the talent of the person. If the person is a good startup person, please give them new projects. Don't force people to become great scale people. Most of you would be phenomenal scale people because that's what you love doing. You need a lot more process while scaling. Not everyone has that. I have some phenomenal team members who are great scale guys, would not be good startup people. I call them big company people. They enjoy it at this stage. Startup, roll up your sleeve. You need all-rounders. People will do it once in a while, but not all the time. But the startup guys are the guys, they'll say, it doesn't matter what job it is. Give me anything. I'll throw anything at me, I'll do it. But then as the company grows, it's about specialization, and then it's about super specialization, where obviously startup culture or startup skills don't work. Our company has really been built by relentless innovation. I was sharing just before this session over a tea with some of the folks out here. Our product managers are the engine of our growth. Our product managers are our brightest guys. They're also expected to be the engines of growth. They are the ones who think of new features, use their gut, but back it with analytics. We push them to spend 2 full days or 4 half days a month talking to customers, just listening to what customers are saying, besides reading all the data and the trail left behind by our 10 million customers every month on our website with over 100 million pages. So we have too much data, but we have to analyze that data. It's up to us to want to understand what the customer wants, what the customer likes, what the customer doesn't like. I do this as a special different presentation where the kind of techniques we use are heat mapping, which is where is your gaze going on the site, what is the blind spot. And we study that a lot because that's important to us, what don't people see. We give them blind tests, so that's very common, where we'll take them to a third-party location and we'll give them 3 sites, they're real customers, and we'll say, go ahead and book a hotel room. And tell us where you booked it, why you booked it. You get a 20% discount, you get paid to come there, you get food to eat, etc. But we need to know what you liked in that site and what you didn't. The amount of answers you can get from customers is amazing. And then one tool called A/B testing. A/B testing is the holy grail in our business, which means control group A is exposed to a change we make on our website. Control group B is not. Very often, control group A is just 1% of our traffic. So whenever we're making a big change, so our homepage right now, by the way, is going through a mega change. We're now at 85% new version, but 15% are still seeing the old version. We started with 199. 1% of you randomly saw the new homepage, and we measured conversions on that control group A, 1% versus 99%. And we got convinced to make the change only when we saw positive conversions. Otherwise, we said it's not worth doing. It's the beauty of the online medium. You can't do this offline world. Hindustan Levers launches a product, they got to go to Vizag or Pune or somewhere else and test market. But it's not ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus is everything else remaining the same. Because if airfares change from week to week, we never could test it truly in a real scenario. So A/B testing is just phenomenal, and it helps us in a big way. I'm going to skip this because I see time is totally out. I want to keep time for Q&A. And I also want to talk about this. So one of the biggest challenges I've had is to preserve our culture as we've grown. Startup culture, till the time you're 50, 100 people, it's very easy to know everyone, to really bond with everyone, and everyone feels, it's very close-knit and it's wonderful if you work in a small organization. There's nothing like it. If I could have had it my way, I would have stopped at 100 people. Really, the big company thing, you lose that culture. But unfortunately, you can't. Some companies manage to do it, but most don't. We're proud of the fact that we're still considered one of the best places to work 4 years in a row. We've done pretty well, ended up in the top 2, 3, 4, 10, and hopefully we'll be able to keep that going. What helps is that we've been very open about sharing the wealth, and I wish Nandan was here, but I think I'm personally inspired by what he and Murthy did at Infi, and they're one of the first companies in India who changed the paradigm. And they actually shared, they were very open about ESOPs, about, people sharing. When we went public in 2010, we had 75% of our people holding ESOPs. And something we're really proud of. And we did have one of the peons actually, and it's a good story, where, he was able to go back to his village, buy some piece of land, etc., from the money he made. And I think that definitely helps. It's not the only thing you want to do, but at least when professional turn entrepreneurs, I find it shocking, and you read from time to time how they're not open about sharing the wealth. Because, clearly none of them expected as professionals to make that kind of wealth. If you made that kind of wealth, it's only fair that you share it with the people who have helped you. In summary, MakeMyTrip's secret sauce, if there were, happy employees make happy customers. So it's hard to choose between the two. But gun to head, I would say I want a happy employee first, because otherwise I can't get a happy customer. Brand building for us, we do advertise, but we advertise only when we're sure of the product, and it's built over time. Testimony to the fact, I mean, 99% of you have tried the product, hopefully you'll come back. It's taken time. We've been there 13 years. It doesn't happen overnight. We've seen a lot of fly-by-night guys come, go, advertise a lot, do a lot of TV, and then suddenly disappear. What happened? You just basically destroyed venture capital money. That's all you did. You burnt a lot of the money and you didn't deliver value. And our experience is that really, over time, only brand and experience, only experience will help build the brand. Keep encouraging everyone in the company, don't obsess on competition. Not because competition isn't good, which is also a fact, by the way. Our competition is pretty lousy right now. But more importantly, because that will take you off track. You will be following competition and not be obsessing on who you need to obsess, which is the customer. You obsess on customer, you obsess on solving problems. The rest is very, very simple. In analytics, we trust. There's no decision we take which is not backed up by data. If it isn't and it's purely gut, then we still need to kind of quantify it in terms of, okay, what are we expecting by taking this punt of, let's say, 1 crore of rupees? What can we expect to get? And finally, as we say, play soccer and not tennis, because that's what company life is about. It's 11 people, not 11 individuals that make a team. In tennis, as you know, you can win the Davis Cup with 1 star, as I guess right now, Serbia is on the verge of doing or could have done. So Jeff Bezos of Amazon said, work hard, have fun, create history, but 2 out of 3 is not an option. I've not got a better slogan till date, and this is what we believe in, at least at Make My Trip. So that's it from my side. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. That's all we have time for today. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So thank you, Deep. Thank you for your insights. If I can ask you to stay back for a minute.
Awesome.
I'd now like to invite Rajiv Panikkar, chapter of the Kerala, president of the Kerala chapter, to come and give a memento to Deep.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Wow. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Thank you.